So welcome.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm well.
Good.
I'm pleased that the summer has finally arrived, and we've got some stability in the political arena.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think that the markets
just
might
had the
start to.
When was that? 4 days ago? 5 days ago? Yeah.
So I think that the future's looking bright.
So are you already seeing some change?
I think that the markets had already priced in the fact that Labour were going to sort of be in.
Okay.
That was a relatively obvious outcome. So I don't think there's necessarily any rush to sort of price adjustments or anything like that. I think that they've hit the ground running in terms of putting a stake in the ground around planning reform, around renters' rights bill, and that have got clear indication that the housing is a way forward for economic growth. I mean, they've staked everything on economic growth because they've talked about taxes not going up, and how they're going to fund this is primarily through growth. And I think that they're also staking that on the housing sector because it would otherwise have been announced by Rayner rather than Reeves. So the fact that the Chancellor has announced the planning reform, would it give you an indication that
it's going to happen, isn't it?
That it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that that's very positive. And the next step is obviously interest rates. And hopefully we'll see some movement in September, and then we sort of will start moving forward from there. I do think that the targets of 1.5 million homes in 5 years is a little bit ambitious, and I don't think we're going to achieve that. Not to be down at heel about it, but it's more around the fact that actually it takes some time to get planning reform, and then obviously planning applications,
and also
then
get skill sets. You've got to have the resource, and we are not, as a country, we're not used to building hundreds of thousands of houses.
No,
so we don't have the people to do this.
That's right, and I think by year 3, if we're actually at the cadence of being able to achieve the 1.5 on a rolling average, then we'll be doing really well. So that's my view.
I know, I completely agree, and bizarrely, and I not that I'm going to discuss politics because I never do, but people who know me will know.
You promised.
No, I'm a little bit here, but I find it bizarre that actually they are inheriting an improving economy here.
Of course, yeah.
And so they are on the benefit of that. I mean, everything else
to an extent, it couldn't get.
Everything else is a little bit of a. We'll have to say shit. Yeah, I'm being told yes. Everything else is a bit of a shit show.
We just talked about clean language.
We just talked about this. But everything else is a bit of a shit show. But actually the economy, there is those embers of improvement and life.
And I think that there is sentiment is hugely important in the property sector. As agents thrive on sentiment. That's how they make a market. They have to, propel it forward. And I think that's naturally coming through other aspects because the populace wants things to get better, and they want to find a leader, a reason to have faith. And I think that's where I think is the milestone and the hump that we're moving over now in terms of the markets. And the Euros final kind of helped, the fact that we even got there. Wimbledon is always lovely time and great sentiment. And there was a changing of the guard on the men's final, which is
stopped raining.
It stopped raining. So there's some good things. There's some things to feel good about.
So you're director of BTR at Godwin. You kind of run that hand in hand with being the MD of Monogram Living, which we'll talk about. You're the chair of the Association of Rental Living. You're the chair of Soho Housing.
Not anymore.
Oh, you're not anymore.
No, I stood down.
So when did that happen?
2 years ago now.
Oh, okay. So that's wrong. You need to.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
I think you're obviously.
Is it wrong on my LinkedIn?
No, it's not. I think it's probably right. I got it in my head. Obviously, the biggest role you have in terms of your volunteering is the
ARL. What?
Chair of the Locale
sorry,
advisory board. That's obviously the one
it's
you
just
spend.
brand new. That's all. I'm not quite.
Spend more time thinking about than anything else.
Yeah.
Can we edit that?
It's only just literally like it was announced Monday.
No, we're keeping that in.
Yeah, right. Okay, all
And then you worked for Pinnacle Places before then. I'm just going back.
Yeah.
You worked for the Young Group.
Yeah.
And then when I met you, you were working for City Living London. And that struck me as like being a really happy time for you.
Gosh.
I'm not saying the rest has been like, but City Living London seemed to be like sort of almost your baby, quite a small agency where you had quite a lot of autonomy and you could do things and you were trying things out.
Yeah, it was I mean, I don't come from property.
No, I know. I'm like, we're going to go further back.
Right, okay.
So let's just park the City Living London.
Okay.
So before that,
Yeah.
sort of growing up in Australia, in Queensland, talk to me about sort of home life. What did that look like? Sort of, of a young Lesley Roberts.
Yeah, I grew up with my siblings. I'm one of four. I'm the youngest. 2 older sisters, a brother, and then me.
Right.
I was a happen chance. I was a trip to Peru.
Really?
I think.
So is there quite a big age gap then, or is it?
Not necessarily, but I think after my brother, I think that
He was a bit of a nightmare.
Obviously.
Okay.
But
it's the feral third child.
Two girls and a boy. I think that the
Kind of
probably
that's enough.
Yeah. And then my mum was booked to go to South America with some dear friends of hers, and then she found out she was pregnant. So I feel like before I'm done, I owe her a trip to go there.
Yes.
Just to sort of.
So she never went.
No, she never went. So I feel like I should
Yes.
fulfill that. So she
Kind of
doesn't
return the favour. Really.
Exactly. Here's the trade. And so we grew up with my mum and 4 of us, and my dad was not very far away on the other hill. And but we were primarily raised by my mother.
Right.
And we were quite a tight unit, actually. And my mum comes from a farm. She was the oldest of 3 and the only female, and her father was a prisoner of war, and he very much instilled the fact that things like, if you own a car, you need to know how to change the oil, you need to know how to, the mechanics of it, you need to be able to change the tyre, it's your responsibility. So very much about self-sufficiency and resourceful.
And taking responsibility.
And taking responsibility and being, and so that was, and there was, don't get me wrong, my dad was very much a part of our lives, but it was mum and us where mum had to work full time to support us. And so, I was making my own sandwiches for school from basically day dot. The responsibility to get ourselves to school and from school, but very strong community.
Yeah.
And there was always somebody sort of who knew where the kids were at any given time. It was very relaxed in many respects. It's not quite as sort of controlled as it is now in terms of everyone has phones, you know exactly where everybody is, but it was done by a different mechanism, I guess. There was always eyes on everyone, and but quite a lot of freedom. And I do remember spending a lot of my childhood reading. I used to read a lot. I couldn't actually see until until I went to school. And I know my mum feels terribly guilty about this.
What do you mean
but
see? See what?
Literally.
Oh, wow.
Literally,
Okay.
I didn't see very well, but until I went to school, it wasn't really discovered.
Right.
Because the teacher, she called me over one day and she sent a note home with me at the end of the day, and she'd asked me to read something. She called me over to the back of the room. She asked me to read something, and I was like on the board, so I can't see it. I could see, and I do remember it very clearly, one book on the bookshelf which was yellow and it had a big orange O, and I was like, oh. So she sent a note home to my mum, and my mum was mortified because
She hadn't picked it up.
She worked for an optometrist.
No.
Which actually, she worked for an ophthalmologist, so she worked for an eye surgeon, not an eye doctor. But I think that she felt terribly guilty. But I can imagine trying to, make ends meet for children. The 4th one gets bundled along with everything. And her excuse was, well, your siblings used to always speak for you. Lesley, which one do you want? Oh, she'll have that one.
Yeah.
So anyway, subsequently, I sort of...
That is, I'll just say, having been a single parent with 4 kids,
Yeah.
and the ex-wife was 800 yards down the road, but, it was very much you get on, and it was very much, guys, I'm not going to do everything for you, so you've got to be a bit more self-sufficient
Yeah.
than you would in a normal, with 2 parents and
Yeah.
children household. And it was very much, and as a result, I think it'll be interesting to see what what direction your siblings have gone in and what they do. But my lot are all, and as everybody knows in the room, they're all over the place at the moment. So there's one in Canada, there's 2 in Australia, there's one in New Zealand, and all mid-late 20s and doing stuff, working, surviving, travelling, and beginning to almost settle in to communities, but quite self-sufficient. I think that's people say are the privileged or very confident, and I think they are, but also they're just quietly self-confident, self-assured.
I love my parents and their partners deeply, and I think growing up we were taught self-resilience and being resourceful because it needs must, but at the same time it was never anything that was untoward, like as in we were a strong unit and there was always love and support there, but it was, you have to learn to fend for yourself. And I think I'm not privileged enough to be a parent, but I do have lots of nieces and nephews, and fortunate enough to be a godparent as well. And I think my observation about growing up was that the best thing that parents can do for their children is to allow them to be fully self-sufficient on their own, because parents can't be there forever, and as much as we'd like to think that, but they won't be, and that should be the natural order of things. And I'm very thankful that my parents always promoted a very loving and supporting environment, but you learn to fend for yourself, and you learn to be accountable, and you learn how to make your own way. And they're very strong both of them were very strong about education. So I was always privileged enough to have a very good education. Some of that was not just formal, but, being, I had quite strong expectations about what I should and shouldn't do, and strong moral code, but also just being a good person. And they were also always very supportive of travel and exposure and international. It would travel domestically, but I was also privileged enough to be able to travel. I did a Rotary exchange when I was just after school. I went to boarding school, which was also a really privilege, because you learn a lot. And then subsequently, I've been fortunate enough to travel all sorts of places, and then came over here.
So just before we make the jump to over here. So school, college, university. Yeah.
So I went to.
But studying communications.
Well, originally, so after school, I went to boarding school for the last 3 years in Brisbane. So I grew up in Townsville, which is North Queensland, a very hot, tropical, great lifestyle, but hot. And then I went to boarding school for the last 3 years in Brisbane. And then I went overseas was fortunate enough to do a Rotary exchange to Canada.
Okay, right.
And then
whereabouts?
In a place called Kitchener-Waterloo. It's a university town.
East, west, central?
It's an hour west of Toronto.
Okay.
And great place, and amazing memories, and one of the happiest years of my life. Just meeting all these international people, and you go to school, and you you're social but also educational, right? And then when I came back, my brother had enrolled me in a course in IT. And just
because you thought it was something you should do.
Well, interestingly, I came back and was quite stroppy and was immediately disenrolled myself and said, I don't want to do that. And then, and I wasn't particularly, fabulous academically at school. I went to a really, really high-end, high academic school in Brisbane Girls Grammar. So the average was probably above average, but at the time I felt very average. And but I wasn't heading to law school, which is my father's profession, and where I thought you asked about what I wanted to do when I was a child. I think deep down I probably thought I was going to be a writer, but then I was like, no, I'm going to be a lawyer, just like my dad, and 6 generations of law and so forth, and didn't get the results for that is for sure. Anyways, so my brother, thought, and so I disenrolled myself, and then I went away and thought about it, and I thought, right, hold on, this IT thing, we had just started to get computers at school, and I was like, I actually don't know anything about it, but it looks like it's going to be pretty important.
Yes.
So I thought, oh, okay, actually he's onto something here. I need to learn about IT. So I went and re-enrolled myself. So I could thank my brother for that.
Okay.
And that's where
Your brother, the lawyer.
Well, he is now.
No,
he
surprise,
wasn't back then.
surprise.
I know. He went back at a later age, and after he had one career already, and went back and studied law. But he doesn't. And he did work in a law firm for a little while. But he's now a commercial director for actually for a lithium battery company, which is really interesting because it's again, it's about the future. It's about what's happening.
And the other two?
The other two, my oldest sister, I call her G.I. Jane. Well, we all call her G.I. Jane.
Okay.
Like she crosses deserts, like runs safaris. I think she's about to go on Kokoda Trail, which is in Papua New Guinea.
Okay.
And I said, what is this? And she's like, I've lost count. It's 28 something to maybe, I'm not sure. She's done it so many times. She often goes as the medic. She supports like people who are, overachievers or high achievers to do sort of extreme sort of treks to help them kind of like realize their potential and so forth. So, and then in her day job, she lives in a remote town at the moment out back. And she runs the nursing station there. So she is in the medical profession. But she's always doing something like, mad.
Dangerous.
Well, not mad or dangerous, but like pushing herself and her potential. There's sort of, this constant, drive within all of us to kind of do.
More.
Yeah. And then my second sister, she's an IT project manager.
Okay.
She lives over here with me now.
Okay.
She used to live over here and then she came back just before COVID for a job and she stayed. Well, couldn't leave at first, but now she stayed, and I'm forever grateful for that because otherwise COVID would have been really, really so much more trying than it was. So I enrolled in IT and it was really interesting. So I actually learned how to code.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Pretty basic.
Okay.
C+, but COBOL,
you understand
C++.
the basics.
Yeah, and I think what it probably did was help me understand the forensics of IT and the sort of the structure, and also that the fact that it's supposed to be there to actually enable rather than the other way around, which I think sometimes that's what happens with software systems or platforms or programs, is that the user becomes the slave rather than, and anyways, so I really did enjoy the IT. There was a lot of nerdy people in that course.
Really?
But I found myself attracted to the business element of it. So because I think as a rounded course, they were trying to get the students to understand that, you still have to somehow commercialize what you do. And I found myself really attracted to the business subjects. And then I met somebody who was doing a brand new course in Brisbane around business communications, business strategy, organizational change, and it had a journalism kind of angle to it. And so I applied to do that. So I did another course, and then I absolutely thrived. So all of a sudden, where I was pretty ordinary at school, having found my niche, and I was, passable at coding, but it certainly wasn't my, calling. That business communications and business strategy, I was like, oh wow, this is what it really feels like to be. And so I did reasonably well in that course, and it was it was easy because it felt good, and it was I really enjoyed it.
Okay. So, but you didn't go, you then went into a communications role? Well,
I was working in hotels at the time to fund my, my living and my degree and so forth. And so I worked at Sheraton actually in Brisbane, and I was recruited. Well, I was recruited. It was interesting because I worked in a cafe, and one day I happened to serve the training manager of the Sheraton. I didn't know, but and she then came and recruited me, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting way you get recruited, but it's also interesting because I use that method now, because it was like, oh right, proof is in the pudding, someone can perform, right? So
I think that's really interesting because we had because in the early days we used to take a lot of people from the hospitality industry.
Yeah.
So it was about where do you recruit people doing something that basically you needed people with experience of sort of, the face-to-face,
Yeah.
who were very relaxed, who were quite competent, who were happy to spin lots of plates.
It's multitasking.
And multitask, but also be able to handle the pressure, that personal pressure, and also that gives you the breadth of, as ours was called, the great general unwashed, washed public, who can go from being absolutely brilliant and totally sincere and very moral to not. And you've got to, as in the hospitality, you've got to handle the whole thing. I did 2 years overseas. I think you remember this, sort of skiing and what have you. I spoke French and skied a bit and did that, and then had 2 summer seasons as well in Greece, and then 9 months in Istanbul. And it's absolutely stood me in really good stead in terms of just having had probably a bit more of a silver spoon in my mouth when I was born in terms of education than the vast majority of people, to then come and meet everybody else, and that probably sounds wrong, but to meet everybody else on the public and learn this is what life is about, and this is who people are, and this is what the public is, and there are variances and breadths of views and visions and attitudes and approaches and behaviour. And that's brilliant. And then I remember going to MIPIM a few years ago, 7-8 years ago, and everyone, we always took people from the hospitality or the hotel trade. And in fact, Tony, who's our COO, who's been with us for 14 years, I think, was a deputy manager of a boutique hotel business chain, and she sort of came in and said, "Oh my God, you're IT," and I went, "No, we are IT, but I need someone who can spin lots and lots of plates, and who's going to be calm, but also is going to be very clear in their vision." And I remember asking the guy who was, I think, running IHG Hotels, whatever it was, the International Hotel Group, whatever it is, one of the 7 big groups, and we sort of said, where do you recruit from? And interestingly, he said, we recruit from the airlines.
Yeah.
Because the airlines train brilliantly.
Really well.
So airlines first, then hospitality, and then everybody else.
And some people say retail as well.
Yeah.
And I think retail,
and so did we.
Your variance in that. And a subsector of that might be high-end retail, but it's really understanding the customer and really understanding the future pacing of and Sheraton was amazing for their training system back.
Yes.
This was a long time ago. But really, really robust training. And I think that, I've been fortunate enough to, as I said, travel and to be exposed to, lots of different cultures and so forth. And I think hospitality does teach you all of those things and the transferable skills, but it also teaches you that there's not necessarily a correlation between, rich, poor, nice, not nice, and the value set. And I think that that's something that is really important to carry all the whilst. And that's life exposure, but working for a high-end hotel, we'd get people who come in for a special birthday and they've saved up a lot of money to do that, and then actually,
and it's not necessarily their
environment, but to make them, to make that special for them and to make it an occasion. But then you've got people who come in and could afford anything they want and really weren't very grateful for those sorts of things. So there's a sort of like that's the great unwashed washed paradox, and it was, to make things special for people was always something that would give me a lot of energy. So
it's incredibly rewarding.
It is very rewarding. It's also, on the flip side, it can weigh you down.
Oh yes.
So in hotels, I worked. So I stayed on while I was working full time and studying full time. I stayed on after I finished my degree, and so I did the rotation. So I worked in front of house, back of house, the housekeeping sides or the service sides in the restaurants or and I had really good, as I said, training. But I do remember one particular individual he was in charge of F&B. Zahir was his name, and it was like a lightning bolt. He used to train about standards and so forth, but it was all around future pacing, sort of in terms of never ask somebody if they want a drink when they've finished the drink. Ask them when they've got about that much left in the glass. He said, because they're enjoying it so much, they don't want it to end. Whereas if you ask them when it's finished, it's more like, now I've got
It's a bigger decision.
It's a bigger decision. And it was and then he would sort of say, we had a program of an express buffet for lunchtime. He said, we're going to scrap this because the average the average time for people who dine is 1 hour and 15. So if we're doing it in an hour, what happens is everybody gets frustrated, and then the customer is being rushed, and then you don't have enough time to turn the tables and all this kind of stuff. So there was sort of like lots of those small lessons about the commercialization of actually what was the stats were telling you, and how you upsell, and that layering of understanding, the training, the standards, the protocol, and then the human behavior and the commercialization. All of these things are so important in the mix of anything. But that was the stuff that I was like, oh, this is all like really meaty stuff. And it's making sure that both sides, the customer has a good experience, and then the business is able to deliver that in a cost-effective way, and actually the continuous improvement. And that's something I've always sort of like, focused on, because it's really rewarding. It's a win-win. And
and that it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
you can't have one winning and the other not.
Yeah,
because then you've got an imbalance.
Yeah, I mean, there's inevitably some compromise somewhere, but if you can find enough middle ground, and I take that approach with most things that I do, whether it's chairing a board or seeing how we can move things forward in a positive manner. So after hotels, and it was great, and I ended up in the engineering department, sort of coordinating all the facilities management, and also did the hotel tours for investors and so forth, which drew back to when I was a Rotary Exchange student. I had to do a lot of public speaking and talking about where it came from and the country and all that.
And are you
sort of
happy
stuff.
doing that? Is that because a lot of people I find, especially when we do this within the work environment, really are not comfortable and haven't got that grounding of standing up and being able to talk?
I think I am comfortable, but it obviously started early, and also always want to have something meaningful to say. I don't necessarily just want to be there for the sake of being there. And I do think it's a really important skill set to evolve. Obviously not everybody wants to do it or is comfortable, but it does get easier and more comfortable as the more you do it. And I think one thing I've learned, and somebody taught me this, it's all about authenticity and congruency.
We're
diverging.
We've well, we said we would. I'd like to know more about what you actually do today now.
Right.
So we fast forwarded and we've gone through, I mentioned it before, through City Living, through Pinnacle, through Young, through sort of various sort of different Allsop as well. Yes. So fast forward to Monogram and Godwin.
So Monogram.
So what do you do?
So Monogram, I joined a little while ago to spearhead the JV between Godwin Group and North American Private Equity.
Right.
To build a platform for a BTR investment of £1 billion in the UK. Okay. And Monogram Living is the brand. Is the platform.
And how's it going?
It's tough. I'll be honest with you. It's been really tough. I mean, when the JV first started, we were sort of at the change of the market, I would say. So, and we've had some pretty good deals on the cards, and some of those haven't come off due to the interest rate rises last year, and then the market has just been really, really tough. So we are still working quite hard at it. And it is an exciting time, as we've just talked
optimistic?
about. Yeah, really optimistic. I mean, that we've just talked about the turning of the market. So, yeah, it's a really exciting proposition, and we've got a great skill set between the two, and hoping to do great things.
And you see BTR as the future of all our
problems,
pains and woes,
silver
and problems.
Bullet? No, I don't. I see it as part of a part of a rich tapestry of housing solutions. I've been in BTR for a very long time, and it's a fantastic sector. I also think that within BTR, there's also a wide spectrum of what BTR can be. And by BTR, I talk about the holistic rental, single family and multifamily, so urban and suburban. And that proposition is really strong. And to make the UK an attractive proposition for investors, for the BTR sector, we're working quite hard with the ARL and BPF and other industry bodies, because it's definitely part of a solution, not the solution, but it is part of. I think we're up to 2.5% of the rental sector.
That much?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I think we're just toppling over 100,000 actually up and running, which is tiny really, but the pipeline is obviously much stronger than that. Single family housing is going from strength to strength. It is really attractive from an investment point of view just because of the risk profile. It's you know, you can do it in smaller tranches. Your exit should you need it is, you know, one by one sale. You can also obviously lease it up one by one, whereas towers is slightly different metrics in terms of once you start, you've got to keep going and you know, risk profile in terms of either development and lease up and fire safety, the fire safety bill and so forth. There's the gateways and a whole lot of other things happening.
Okay.
But broadly speaking, you know, the living sector and co-living is also going really well. I think that there is definitely something, there's a lot more to do in the later living sector. You just...
Well, none of us are getting younger.
Well, exactly, the population
we're
is
all
aging.
living
Yeah.
longer.
And I think yesterday I read about this drug that's going to help us live another 25% longer. I'm like,
great.
Is that a good thing? I'm not sure, but never mind. That's more...
So holistically then, obviously the rental market, and because a lot of our work is in London, that seems to have gone bananas and seems to be pricing people out of the market. So what's your take on this? How do you resolve that particular issue? I've got my view on this, but it involves planning, it involves reform, and it involves, you know, so we deal with sort of mixed use, we deal with commercial properties as well. And I think there are a bundle of, there's a whole basket case, and a lot of them are, of sort of tier 3 sort of commercial offices in sort of those grey areas within the cities. And London, it's not, London is
the sort of stranded assets.
It's the stranded assets. And what do you do with those? And I'm very much of, having worked on a couple of sort of quite interesting mixed use schemes, is that you can make them little oases of pockets of life. And you have some mixed use stuff. So you have some resi there, affordable resi. You have a mix, you know, like they did it in East Village. I think that's a really nice way of doing it. And you don't, you know, section it out. You mix it all in. So you've got that whole life thing we talked about before. But you have retail, so you have a little bit of office. You have, you know, a little bit of public space around it as well, some greenery. And you've suddenly got then people living and working there. And then that, you know, it has a really good sort of, it goes out, doesn't it? It cascades out. And then you create more retail on the back of that. And the whole thing begins with a sort of a catalyst of people and
this is
life.
where potentially BTR is one of those sort of,
fixes.
You know, well, it's a firelighter for accelerating the catalyst for mixed use developments, because it can be occupied quite quickly, and it's not dependent necessarily on mortgage rates for the whole for sale.
But how do you overcome that price thing where it's gone the last 18 months, 2 years? Rental things have gone ballistic, absolutely bonkers. So it's really unaffordable for a lot of people.
You're right, it is, and that's a supply-demand imbalance. And that's,
so do you cap it then?
Rents?
Yeah.
I don't think that that's the answer. I mean, Scotland has sort of done us a favour in England because of the disaster of the rent pressure zones and capping rents, and that just creates a two-tier market, and it doesn't work. And then the rebound from that has been quite severe. So that's obviously good for England, the fact that Scotland has gone down this track to show the government that this is what happens. And all the studies around the world around rent controls will demonstrate that that is not the way to create a stable market, because you get segregation and tiers and it's almost like black economies of rent. So it really is about releasing and increasing supply. So that's where planning reform and the government and encouraging more product. I also think, just on the point around, and I'm a huge supporter of mixed use, I actually think that is more of the trend, and it's been coming for a very, very long time.
Slowly.
It's just but the regulation and the way in which we manage the built environment is quite siloed, because you've got housing over here, and then you've got commercial, and then you've got retail, and it's all quite segregated. And I think that there is something to be done there. I'm not the expert, but I think that there is definitely something to be done there. But in the I just lost my train of thought. In the we were just talking about mixed use.
Silos, caps.
No, I can't remember.
Future. So where do you see this going then? So you said BTR is like 2.5% at the moment.
Yeah. So in terms of the mixed use, I mean, we don't, we do work and we do play and we do live, but as human beings, we do all three, and in every capacity you show up as what one leads, but we're still the component parts of all those things. So I think that's why mixed use and the way that we've come through COVID, now we're finally in a sort of more permanence of actually the trends of wanting hybrid working or the way in which we use space. What that's probably left us with is these stranded assets, because when people come to work now, the impetus to be at work means that they want a high quality space, they want a high quality experience, and that's not exclusive to just work. That's right.
Proximity to
that's right.
Transport hubs.
So this sort of like meshing of work, live and play is going into every space. So when you're living, you potentially want more of the access to nice things and the ability to do and be in the way you want to be. So, be you. And I think that's where the opportunity for these mixed use developments lies, but there is sort of a change of how we might manage them or view the management, because they're not as siloed. They shouldn't be as siloed as they are. Yeah. And regulation and is sort of is trailing well behind.
So do you see that as the fix then?
I don't know if there's ever.
Or do you think there are various sort of silver bullets, as you were saying?
I don't know if there's any silver bullets. I think it's a long, hard journey of change and evolution. But if we have a new government and we're doing planning reform, there is an opportunity to look at this wholesale and go, well, hold on. Things like, I think there's a massive opportunity in the market for stranded assets, and press of late has just highlighted several companies who can also see this in terms of conversion of the commercial into hotels, into the PD element of turning into co-living, and office blocks will probably be more suitable for co-living than they would be than BTR, just because of the floor plates and the pillars and so forth. But I think a flexibility from local authorities to actually see this in the round is...
So devolution of autonomy in terms of planning, in terms of
well,
money,
the planning does
else.
Live with the local authority anyway, but
that's another one of the strands from the King's speech yesterday. Was
exactly.
More authority being given out, devolved out to the mayors and that sort of stuff. Which again, I think,
but not in terms of rent. They was quite deliberate about that, and I think that's important as well, because what we want to see is more product, more varied product, because actually there's a whole you think about, you live in a home, and then hopefully, and then you have purpose-built student, and then you have the rental market more broadly, which goes from post-student or just your average person coming out of school right through to the needs for later care. That's a massive journey of human needs in terms of your living and working, and the social mobility of going here, there for work, life, play. And I think that's where the opportunity is to sort of for councils to be more open-minded around what could accommodation look like, what could housing look like. And they do, I think it was a mistake for the government to get rid of housing targets, but those local authority, the local plans and so forth, that's another area that needs a real focus. Nobody holds these councils to account when they don't have one. They don't invoke it and they don't update it. There's no stick. Not necessarily. It should be carrot. That's always the better way forward. But nobody's been holding them to account, and therein lies the failing. But councils are also under enormous pressure, and they don't have the funds, and they don't necessarily. There's certainly not always the skill sets, and I think that. We're trying to get a lot out of not very much, and just the screws have been going down and down and down. Maybe we need to sort of
But
think about that in more broadly, and it's all coming down to economic growth.
it does. But I sense there's a sense of optimism here.
Yeah,
and as
there
you
is.
say, you've got to start somewhere. But I feel, the last 14, 15 years of stuff that's been going on, you do feel now as though you've got some people in government, in an authority, who are saying, okay, we understand what the problem is.
Yeah.
And I know, speaking to the BPF guys, Melanie and the team there, is that they have spent quite a lot of time talking to the government and the shadow government, as was the shadow cabinet then, and actually saying this is what needs to happen. And so I do feel as though there is an alignment and there is an understanding, much more of a realistic understanding, to say, okay, we know we've got a problem. This thing is not going to happen overnight. There's no way. It's not going to be a quick fix. But at least you start and you put the pillars in, and then you can build on from there. So I think it's going to be a 10, 15, 20 year.
I agree.
Which is why, again, this whole thing, I'm not going on about my political thing, but this whole cross-party stuff. And I think there was one thing that was, I think the health, was actually they've parked that and said, no, that's going to be a cross-party sort of solution.
I think housing needs to be cross-party.
And I think there are 4 or 5 of those.
Housing, health and
areas.
education are fundamental
You've
things.
You've got to ring fence those and just say, we're going to just have an agreed strategy and leave for 25 years and just run that strategy.
Yeah.
And no one go and fiddle with it.
I totally agree with you. Whether it's going to happen, because I think Labour now is saying, we've got a 10-year run.
Yeah.
We don't need you.
No.
We don't.
No.
But
I do think it's like actually being more inclusive, because people have got good ideas.
Yeah.
You don't need just
get the ego out of the way.
Get the ego out of the way. Get everybody in the room, and actually let's come up with a plan.
Yeah.
Lesley, we are sort of slipping into the red zone in terms of how long we can talk for, but I could sit here all day. But so Lesley, outside of work, you're talking about your dog. Does dog have a name?
Mally.
Mally?
Yeah.
Why Mally?
Well, some dear family friends, my godparents actually, which is how I got into mining, they live in America, and they celebrated their 80th birthdays and 60th wedding anniversaries and brought several of their dear friends to a chateau in France many years ago.
Oh, very nice.
Called Chateau Mally.
Okay.
And my dog is also, my sister's name's Margot. And so it's Margot and Lesley.
No. I went
so
to
that's
Chateau
Mal.
Margot once.
Oh no, it wasn't Chateau.
Okay.
So that was MAL,
Okay.
and we got her during COVID. So Mally, Mally is also an Australian term. It's a type of bush, a Mallee bush.
Ah.
So there's a tie back to Australia.
Oh, okay.
It all kind of like I know.
Some nice references there.
I know, yeah.
Okay.
So she is brilliant. She's you talk about energy. She's a boxer. So, and actually during COVID you're on the screen a lot, so I feel like a lot of people know my dog because I got a puppy, and then oh my god, everyone loves a puppy.
They do.
Yeah, so she is she's a source of inspiration.
So
for sure.
outside of work, how do you keep yourself happy, busy, balanced, grounded?
I do Pilates a bit and yoga, and find
I've
that
just started
really
doing yoga.
really
I was telling you guys,
restorative.
did another one this morning, guys.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And
yoga with Adrienne. It's like, oh god.
Did you?
Standing there in my underpants going, really? Is this? It's like, just get over yourself and just do it. Just stretch, man, stretch.
But that's, yoga, both of them actually, or anything, it really is about it's about the continuity of it. It's about the consistency of it. It's all helpful. That is the real key, consistency, and that's that's always been one of my biggest challenges. Like I'm a 2 feet in person, and I'm on, off, and middle ground has never been my strength. But that's the thing that I try and work on the most. So moderation in consistency is something that is a.
Well, maybe you can take a leaf out of the government's book the next 5 years of some consistency in your life, some stability, time with Mally, and a bit more.
And walking, I really enjoy walking with her and spending time with friends and family.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very, very much. It's been lovely. I feel like I've actually learned some stuff, which is good. Oh, yeah.
Oh, gosh.
I've known you for 15 years or whatever it is, 17 years. So, no, really lovely. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.